at 7:16 a.m. Pacific time, with the station and Dragon flying 262 statute miles right over the border between northern China and Mongolia.
You saw a little bit of motion there of Dragon. That was that relative motion that the soft capture system is damping out. Once that motion is clear, then the soft capture system will be retracted, and Dragon will go for hard capture.
Again, if just now tuning in, that soft capture, that docking coming 7:16 a.m. Pacific, 10:16 a.m. over on the East Coast. Dragon and the International Space Station were flying 262 statute miles right over the border between northern China and Mongolia. So that soft capture ring now going to retract. It's one more step on the way to docking complete.
On board.
Yeah, and so the next step here is once the soft capture ring is retracted, there are 12 latches that we refer to as hard capture latches. Those are what will really create that pressure tight seal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. So once soft capture is complete, and I believe we'll get that call from our core here, Anna, then we'll get confirmation of hard capture, and the crew, of course, aboard have this information on their displays, so they'll also see indication of hard capture complete. And once those two steps are done, then that's docking complete.
That's right, and we're expecting to hear some words from everybody. A pretty monumental moment. I mean, for Doug Hurley, he's returning to where he last docked almost 9 years ago on the very last space shuttle mission, now commanding the very first commercial spacecraft to deliver astronauts to the International Space Station.
That's got to be cool for them. They've mentioned quite a few times that they're best friends, our favorite dads in space, as we've been calling them. This has got to be really cool for them. It's got to be really cool for their families too, watching this.
It looks like we have another quick handover. We'll get that video back shortly. We're about 75% complete already with that retraction. Once that retraction is completed, we'll keep an eye out for the 12 ready-to-hook indicators. Once those are ready, those 12 hooks will begin to engage, and that'll securely attach Dragon to the International Space Station.
Yeah, so right now the vehicle confirming that the soft capture system is deployed correctly and is fully retracted. And then once the soft capture system is fully retracted, that'll set up the vehicle to put in the hard capture pins. There's 12 of those around the docking ring, and that's what creates that airtight seal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. The volume between, which we refer to as the vestibule, is currently not pressurized. Of course, it was just exposed to the vacuum of space until literally minutes ago, about 4 minutes ago. So just waiting for the vehicle to get that.
Dragon SpaceX, ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
All right, so we see those ready-to-hook indicators are lighting up green. So we should be just about to step into those 12 hooks beginning to engage to get that secure mate between Dragon and the International Docking Adapter on the space station.
Wow, right now those two vehicles are flying together. They are attached to each other.
It's been just under 19 hours since we lifted off. We're actually at about 18 hours, 58 minutes, and 42 seconds. So we promised about a 19-hour ride up to station, and we made it just a few minutes before that. They were able to dock a few minutes ahead of schedule. We were tracking them to still take about another 10 minutes, but able to step through all of their burns about 16 minutes ahead of schedule and get us to where we are now. if you missed it just a few moments ago, that initial docking coming at 7:16 a.m. Pacific, 10:16 a.m. over on the east coast of the United States. And they were 262 statute miles flying together over the northern border of China and Mongolia. So really exciting. We're just waiting for this docking complete to be confirmed. We're expecting to hear some words, obviously, from the crew on board and all the excited teams down here. We're just waiting for this moment. And then it's time to start getting Dragon integrated into the station. There will be an umbilical that will get mated, and that'll allow Dragon to flow data and power into the station systems, and then it'll be over to the crew.
Endeavour and station at Houston on the big loop. MCS is configured. We're proceeding with hook driving.
All right, and they did a quick, so the motion control system onboard station now back under those control moment gyros, so handed over from the Russian thrusters, and Dragon now given the go to drive those hooks. We have to do that changeover of attitude control before we drive those hooks, as the Russian thrusters a little bit more dynamic in their control of attitude, and if you had a thruster firing while you were starting to drive those hooks, that could miss a line. So going over to the smoother control moment gyros on the U.S. side, now controlling the attitude on board the station, and those hooks, those 12 hooks on Dragon, about to start driving.
Right now, Dragon and ISS attached, just flying off the east coast of China, just underneath Japan. Attached to each other, we recently passed over to the orbital night, so we're on the currently the dark side of the world. And actually, we're lucky enough to see soft capture happen just as we were crossing over the Terminator line.
And if you're wondering what you're looking at, this is one of the cameras on the very outboard part of the Japanese experiment module, looking back in towards the very front part of Node 2, where Dragon is currently docked. We are in an orbital nighttime, that's why everything is so dark, but you're looking at Dragon. It is horizontal to the ground, so the hatch part is right where that green light pretty much is. You can see the nose cone still illuminated above it, and it is currently attached to an international docking adapter on the International Space Station.
And inside that capsule are Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, first astronauts to fly on a privately developed vehicle up to the International Space Station. Both test pilots got to do some fun tests today. Have a few more steps before they can actually get aboard and ingress to the International Space Station. And that's what we heard over the big loop, that transition, which allows us to then proceed with hard capture.
And we're seeing the first set of hooks, so the first 6 out of the 12 are now closed, 6 more to go.
Again, there are 12 of those along the ring. And that helps us ensure that we have an airtight seal. It is vacuum around them right now, so we want to make sure we're keeping all of that valuable life support in the vehicle. Now the combined ISS Dragon vehicle.
Meanwhile, inside the capsule, Bob and Doug also standing by for this hard capture to complete. And once we have that docking complete call, they'll be able to start stepping through a number of procedures to get them ready to move into the International Space Station. They'll get the go-ahead to doff or get out of their suits, and then they'll have some activities on the Dragon side to prepare for the hatch opening. Chris Cassidy will mainly be working on the station side to pressurize the vestibule. So as Shiv has talked about, the space between the Dragon capsule and the space station was exposed to vacuum, and even after this tight seal has occurred, we'll still be at vacuum inside. So we'll actually open up a valve to supply air from the station side into that space between the Dragon and station hatchways, and they'll get it up to the same ambient pressure that we'll have inside of Dragon and on the station itself. They'll wait for it to thermally balance out, make sure we don't have any temperature swings as we're bringing it up from vacuum, so probably from a very cold temperature up to about 72 degrees that they have in their cabin temperature on board the station, and then we'll get the hatches open.
Dragon SpaceX, hard capture complete. Stand by for docking completion.
Copy.
Now that hard capture is complete, so that's confirmation of those 12 latches to create that airtight seal. Now that's complete, the umbilicals from the station side will interface with the Dragon vehicle umbilicals, and that'll provide power and communications through space station directly to Dragon. Pretty much the whole way up, Dragon's been using a combination of batteries and its solar cells pointed at the sun to make sure that it has enough electrical power for the journey up.
And we're just standing by now for that umbilical to get mated, and that's going to, again, as Shiv was just saying, start the power and data transfer between Dragon and the space station. They've been transmitting data through RF radio frequency on the way uphill, and during the final approach, this will give a hard mate, basically a wired LAN connection between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station itself, and then also being able to draw power from the station systems using those great big solar arrays that are used to generate all of the electricity for systems on board the station. And the soft capture system has been stowed. We see the umbilical starting to deploy. About 40% of the way so far, going pretty quickly. Should just take a couple more seconds until we're all the way connected. And then we should be getting that docking complete call out from the core here in Mission Control, SpaceX and Hawthorne. Standing by.
Dragon SpaceX, docking sequence is complete.
Dragon, we copy docking complete. To say that it's been a real honor to be just a small part of this 9-year endeavor since the last time the United States spaceship had docked with the International Space Station. We have to congratulate the men and women of SpaceX at Hawthorne, McGregor, and at Kennedy Space Center. Their incredible efforts over the last several years to make this possible cannot go overstated. I'd also like to thank Kathy Leaders and her team of the Commercial Crew Program of NASA. An outstanding job by everyone. Last, I'd like to thank the men and women of the National Aeronautics and Space Agency. This is an incredible time to be at NASA. 3 new vehicles to be flown, continuing mission in low Earth orbit, and then to the moon and Mars. We thank you again and congratulate you.
Dragon arriving
Crew of Expedition 63 is honored to welcome Dragon and the commercial crew program to welcome aboard the International Space Station. Bob and Doug, glad to have you as part of the crew. Well done. Bravo Zulu.
We're happy. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Endeavour, this is Houston. Bob and Doug, welcome to the International Space Station after your spectacular rendezvous and docking of the first Crew Dragon vehicle. For the first time since the retirement of the Space Shuttle, you have completed a historic ride to the ISS and have opened up a new chapter in human space exploration. On behalf of the flight control teams here in Houston and in Hawthorne, California, and to our SpaceX colleagues, bravo on a magnificent moment in spaceflight history and on the start of a new journey that has changed the face of space travel in this new era of space transportation. Bob and Doug, good luck, and we look forward to working with you on board.
Dragon SpaceX, Bob and Doug, we here at SpaceX are honored to have been part of ushering in this new era of human spaceflight. On behalf of the SpaceX and NASA partnership, congratulations on a phenomenal accomplishment and welcome to the International Space Station.
Well, thank you, Anna. We appreciate all the good words and everyone thanking us, but it truly was a magnificent effort by the entire team, the SpaceX team, the NASA team, and a team across America who was able to pull this off and bring human spaceflight again to our nation. Thanks for everything. Happy to be aboard.
And Dragon SpaceX, with that, ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. We will be configuring your video to go external shortly, and we have one request for Bob's suit doffing when you're ready to copy.
We copy all. Go ahead for Bob's suit.
During your approach suit leak check, we noticed Bob's suit pass with a lower PSID than his previous vehicle and O&C checks. We still had plenty of margin to support you in a depress, but in order to rule out potential hardware issues, when Bob is doffing, after he opens his structural zipper, check all 3 bladder zipper heads to see if any are partially closed. It is possible that if the head is backed off slightly, that the white tooth is partially visible or a small gap can be seen between the end of the zipper head and the gasket end. Please report observations.
Copy. Bob will take a close look at his zippers when he doffs, and he'll get doffing first, so we'll let you know as soon as we see something or if we see something.
Great. Thank you so much.
Wow. So now Dragon has completed its docking sequence. There's a number of checks. That was an absolutely historic moment. And in spite of that, the ground team's getting right back to business, talking about the suit performance.
Just let us know when the interior cameras are secured.
On Dragon to ground,
Gotta turn the cameras off first before we can get them out of their suits.
Absolutely. So Spacecraft is now docked. They've got several tasks that they're going to need to be able to do. While we're waiting for those tasks to happen, we're actually going to take a short break. But if, in case you just missed it, the Dragon spacecraft is now docked to the International Space Station, docked at 7:16 a.m. local time.
Yep.
Bob and Doug are at the space station.
Yeah, they're there. It was just under a 19-hour journey from their launch to their docking, so pretty much right on what we were expecting. They got there a little bit early today, which was nice as they were able to get through all those burns. But they're docked. It's going to be a little while. They have to do that vestibule pressurization, and then they'll have to do some leak checks.
Dragon on Dragon to ground for Bob. I've got both structural zippers on my gloves lowered, and I do see white teeth visible on both sides. It looks like a full white tooth. I'll give you an update once I get to the leg zipper.
Copy. White teeth on both sides, and we'll await your next status.
So the crew right now just going through some checks of their gloves. They're about to get out of their suits. That'll be the first step for the crew on board Dragon. For the crew on board station, Chris Cassidy is going to start getting that vestibule pressurized, and then they're going to do leak checks. So they're going to be actually taking atmosphere from station, putting it into that vestibule. And then once we get all the leak checks done, things are thermally stabilized, it'll be time for hatch opening. We'll be able to see Bob and Doug get into the space station for the first time from on board the Dragon spacecraft. And again, for Doug Hurley, this is the exact port he was at almost 9 years ago when he was on the very last space shuttle mission. And now he's commanding the first commercial vehicle to dock with the International Space Station. I think that's going to do it for us in Hawthorne. We're going to give you into the very capable hands of Gary Jordan to take you through the rest of the hatch opening. We're going to be watching from here and following along. We can't wait to see these crew members on board the International Space Station. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. We hope you enjoyed the launch. We hope you enjoyed the ride uphill. We really hope you were with us every single moment from suit up until now, so you've been up for over 24 hours. But it's been an incredible experience for us to see these guys get on board the International Space Station, to watch Dragon go through the paces, to be lofted into orbit on Falcon 9, something we've been waiting for years, seeing it come to fruition. I'm still grappling with.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon
really
to ground.
Incredible.
Video is
and
no
Shiv,
interior.
It was an honor doing this with you today.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. They
Dragon copies. Thanks, Anna.
can't step on the crew. That's the one rule.
Yeah.
But, there are some really great words there from all the flight control teams about how this was a joint partnership between NASA and SpaceX. I think everyone is over the moon here at SpaceX for this. Bob and Doug have got to be excited, and now back to business to get the vestibule ready to go and then get them on board the station. So again, thank you for following us. Please continue to watch as Gary takes over for the hatch opening portion. And keep following our social media for more updates on what's happening with Hatch Open.
Over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Dan. What an incredible flight for Bob and Doug, lifting off just yesterday and now in space, attached to the International Space Station. Some kind words all over after docking at 9:16 a.m. Central, and a hard mate just 11 minutes later. We're still not done here. We're going to take you through the pressurization sequence and eventually hatch opening of the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground. Cabin mic check come.
And I hear you loud and clear on Dragon to ground. How me?
Loud and clear.
Excellent.
Good comm checks. We still have a lot of work to do here. We're going to pressurize the vestibule and eventually get...
And SpaceX Dragon with an update from Bob. It looks like a white tooth on the leg zipper as well. We'll take a close look if we can see anything else that might have resulted in that lower leak check pressure.
Copy. Really appreciate the report. Thank you.
Teams behind me will be configuring the Dragon and the International Space Station to welcome Bob and Doug aboard. First, of course, the International Space Station attitude control moment gyros, really holding the Dragon in place through the hard capture sequence. We'll start enabling those thrusters and pressurizing the vestibule. It'll take about an hour until we're able to get the hatch open. The teams here in Mission Control Houston, Orbit 2, led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville, will be taking us through that process. Aboard the International Space Station, Commander Chris Cassidy standing by in Node 2. Right in front of that is the pressurized mating adapter. He recently opened up the hatch to introduce some of the station air and mix it, get a nice mix in there, avoiding some CO2 pockets. That hatch you see just beyond Chris Cassidy there is normally closed. He was able to open it a little bit earlier today, mix some of that cabin air, and get rid of those CO2 pockets, make sure it's all clean and ready for Bob and Doug. He closed it shortly after just to make sure no FOD or foreign objects, anything were to float in there that would inhibit any hatch opening process today. One of the next milestones for Chris Cassidy will be to open up that hatch. He's got some cameras you see placed within that node. We'll get some good views of the hatch opening and welcoming Bob and Doug here in just about an hour. A big moment in history today, May 31st, 2020. Just on the other side of that hatch, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley have successfully arrived at the International Space Station. Still a couple of milestones to get through. Before we can open up that hatch, it's going to take some time. First, pressurizing the vestibule in between the station and Dragon. We'll bring that up to pressure. It's going to take some time for that pressure to stabilize. Of course, the temperature within that vestibule causes a little bit of swing, so we'll just wait for that to pressurize or to stabilize before opening up that hatch. Here at Mission Control Houston, Flight Director Zeb Scoville welcoming the director of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Mark Geyer. We'll have a few other VIPs here in the room to welcome Bob and Doug once they get through that hatch. Now again, this repressurization and hatch opening process is going to take some time. You see now we're going to have some intermittent losses with the communication from the International Space Station. You're seeing now the International Space Station Flight Control Room led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville. Just a handover of some of those audio and visual communications. We'll be regaining those shortly. Might lose them intermittently throughout the repressurization process, but the teams here will be monitoring all of the procedures. Again, pressurizing that vestibule and eventually getting to that hatch opening. From right to left there, seated, you see Flight Director Zeb Scoville. It was he who was leading the teams for both the launch of Bob and Doug over at the Cape. He was leading the teams here in Mission Control Houston. You just saw the Johnson Space Center Director Mark Geyer walk off to the side. Seated next to Zeb Scoville, Joshua Kutrick. He is one of the members of the most recent class of astronauts, the class of 2017. Canadian Space Agency astronaut, went through candidate training and officially became an astronaut just recently. Again, a few milestones to get through to that hatch opening first. The International Space Station attitude control has been successfully switched from control moment gyro only control, enabling some of the thrusters on the International Space Station. We also just received word that Dragon is successfully receiving power.
Ground ISS power connection has been established.
And there you have it. Dragon is successfully receiving power from the International Space Station.
And Dragon copies on Dragon to ground that power has been established. Just let us know when we should make a hardline comm check.
We will, Co. Thank you.
For those of you just joining us, you are getting a live look at NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, commander of the International Space Station, doing some of the prep work to open up the hatch and get ready to welcome Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley aboard the International Space Station. They launched successfully yesterday at 2:22 p.m. Central Time, 3:22 p.m. Eastern, and docked successfully with a contact and capture just a little bit ago at 9:16 a.m. Central Time, 10:16 Eastern. Now, some of the milestones to get that hatch open have already taken place. First, attitude control. For some of the docking sequence, for the initial contact and capture, attitude control was on Russian thrusters. That was moved to control moment gyros for hard mate, making sure that everything lined up and we got those ready-to-hook indicators green before driving those hooks. The attitude control has since been switched to enable some thrusters on the International Space Station. We did get confirmation of good power being delivered from ISS to the Dragon. Next will be to test some hard line communication between Dragon and the International Space Station.
Dragon and Station. It's Houston calling on the big loop. We're prepared and getting ready to transition the comm system to hardline, at which time we're going to do a couple comm checks. We just want to make sure everybody's on board with that and aware. So Dragon first, maybe let me know if you hear this and if you're go with that plan.
Yeah, Houston Endeavor on the big loop. We had you loud and clear.
Houston Station copies and concurs.
Okay, Endeavor and Station, we have you loud and clear on RF right now. We are putting it in work now, so transitioning comm system to hardline, and we'll call you back for voice checks momentarily.
Never copies.
This is Mission Control Houston. The voice you just heard was Capcom Joshua Kutrick from here in Mission Control Houston, relaying through the big loop that's integrated communications with Dragon and the International Space Station, just taking us through those procedures until we get to hatch opening. Now there's an umbilical connection with Dragon, connecting Dragon to the International Space Station. We did get good confirmation that power is flowing from the International Space Station to Dragon. Next, we'll be proceeding with some of the communications checks. The big loop established on the C2V2 Common Communications for Visiting Vehicle through some of the last legs of the rendezvous and docking of Dragon to the International Space Station. We'll switch that over to hardline communications, testing that out here shortly. We're going to get some good views of station today. You see Chris Cassidy working inside Node 2. Just on the other side is the hatch. That hatch is separating between the International Space Station and the pressurized mating adapter. One more hatch to go after that. That hatch opens up to the Dragon hatch with Bob Benkin and Doug Hurley on the other side. Just surrounding Chris Cassidy from this view, you can see a series of cameras. We're going to get some great views from Node 2 there on the left, a couple high-definition cameras. On the right, a 360 VR camera. Part of an initiative to engage viewers and provide views that from the International Space Station that have never been seen before. We'll get to see some of those 360-degree views later after they're configured and stitched on the ground, now being recorded during this historic moment today, May 31st, 2020.
Affirmative, we are on the same page. Those steps in the execution note are all that's needed.
In work.
You're getting a live look at Chris Cassidy aboard the International Space Station. Just in front of him is that 360-degree camera. He's got cameras situated all over Node 2, pointing right towards that hatch. On the other side, we'll be welcoming Bob Benkin and Doug Hurley after pressurization of the vestibule, and we'll start beginning hatch opening after that.
Yeah, we copy MPEV open, Chris.
Another handover of communication from the tracking and data relay satellites, providing video and audio communication from the International Space Station, now integrated with the Dragon Power. Still looking towards some of those hard-line communication checks. Again, we'll lose communication intermittently as the International Space Station flies 269 statute miles.
Station Houston on 2 for Chris. We're go for open on the Node 2 forward hatch.
Regaining some of that video from International Space Station, Chris Cassidy given the go to open that Node 2 forward hatch. Again, he opened it a little bit earlier today to allow some of the station air to mix into the pressurized mating adapter. There it is. Now again, there's a few more hatches to open until we are able to welcome Bob and Doug aboard the International Space Station. You're looking through the hatch into the pressurized mating adapter. There's another hatch down there through the pressurized mating adapter that opens up to the International docking adapter.
Houston on 3, hey Josh, there was zero on DPDT, and the Node 2 forward hatch is open.
And Chris, we copy Node 2 forward hatch open. We concur your go for the next yellow activity. That's your 1515 activity. It's step 2 in 2.102 Crew Dragon ISS arrival through hatch opening. Basically, you're going to cycle the 8-pass equalization valve.
And Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground. If desired, reference procedure 4.400 to monitor vestibule pressurization.
And copies. Small.
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground for 4.012. We've completed up to section 5, and we've got a timer started for 1 hour.
Copy, completed through section 5, and your suits are drying, and you have started a timer for 1 hour. With that, do we have your permission to come back on board?
Get you back on board.
We copy. We are go to come back on board. And with that, you are go to perform sections 1 through 3 of 4.400. We do recommend deferring your step 2.1 for the waste system flush until closer to hatch opening. In section 3, as you are performing your inventory, please collect all your food and water bottle trash and consolidate it into the 2 trash bags within their common bags in location 18. You will transfer the plastic bags containing this trash to ISS for disposal during a scheduled activity after ISS ingress. And do note that you are welcome to defer this inventory until after you eat your meal that is scheduled for right about now.
Okay, Anna, if you could give us 5 minutes before you guys come back on board, we do have some clothing config to complete. Understand we've got to go for sections 1, 2, and 3 of 4.400, and we will consolidate our trash into the bags provided in location 18. And we'll defer the docked waste configuration, section 2 of 4.400, until it gets closer to hatch opening.
Station, we copy 1507.
We copy, and we will wait 5 minutes before coming on board, and we'll check with you before we do so if we don't hear from you first.
Copy, ready.
Thanks, Anna.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're listening to crews on board the International Space Station and Dragon prepare for opening the hatch. You're seeing Chris Cassidy aboard the International Space Station already opened the hatch to the pressurized mating adapter just below that hatchway you see at the center of the screen here. On the other side of the hatch is the hatchway to the International docking adapter. On the other side of that, the recently docked Crew Dragon. Vestibule pressurization is underway. This will equalize the pressure between Dragon and the International Space Station. Once it does come up to pressurization, it will take some time to equalize that pressure because of the temperature difference in the vestibule. Just take some time to stabilize.
Dragon, Endeavour, it's Houston. Calling you on hardline now for a voice check. How do you read? Endeavour, it's Houston calling. Space to ground 2 via hardline now for a voice check. Do you read?